If you want to get ahead financially in life, you need to learn how to make money while you sleep. There are hundreds of ways to make passive income, but few that can be considered truly passive. And today I'm going to share with you how to make money with stocks you already own. That's right. If you already own shares of stock, there's a way for you to create a new monthly income stream all for yourself. This is as easy as it gets. On a scale from 1 to 10, with 1 being the most hands-off and 10 requiring the most work, this strategy is a definite 1. You own shares of stock, you click a couple buttons, and then you get paid. That's what happens when you sell covered calls. But before you can click those buttons and create that new source of income for yourself, you're probably wondering what a covered call is. Let me explain and show you how to use them to create a passive source of monthly income. That's right, today we're here to talk about how to make passive monthly income on stocks that you already own, using covered calls and a strategy laid out especially for beginners. This is what we're going to go through here quickly today, what covered calls are, the benefits, the risks, covered calls versus uncovered calls. That's a big one right there. Who can use them, what kind of accounts you can use them in, because not everybody can, when to sell a covered call, when not to, and how to use them for monthly income at the end there, plus a bonus tip that you definitely want to stick around for. So stay around for number 9 here at the end. Let's get into it with what is a covered call. It is a stock option contract, okay? And the buyer of this contract pays for the right, but not the obligation. So they can, if they want to, if they don't have to buy 100 shares of stock at a specific price known as the strike by a specific expiration date. For those of you who are new to options, make sure you understand what stock options are first. If you want to check them out in the depth, you can check out this card right here in the top right corner to do that. But the seller of covered calls, they get paid for taking on the risk of having to sell 100 shares right there, because every stock option contract is made up of 100 shares, right? Or having 100 shares called away at a specific price by a specific expiry date. So one person buys the right to do something, one person gets paid for taking on the risk of having something done to them. This is an example here to walk you through it. Josh, our boy Josh, he owns 100 shares of Apple, AAPL, okay? And he bought it at $130 per share. So he owns 100 shares, roughly a $13,000 purchase price, right around there, okay? 130 times 100. He agrees to sell a covered call contract to Rachel, okay? Now, Rachel is buying that contract from Josh. Josh is getting paid. Rachel's putting the money down. So Rachel agrees to purchase the call option and pays Josh for the right, again, the right, but not the obligation, to buy his 100 shares of Apple that we talked about that Josh already owns. Josh gets paid for taking on the risk. The current stock price of Apple is going to be at 130. The strike price of the options contract is 150. The expiration date we'll say is March 24th, 2023, roughly 30 days away. And the premium paid to Josh by Rachel is $200 total, or $2 per share, okay? Now, so what are we talking about here? Josh gets paid $200 in premium, okay, $2 per share, and only has to sell his 100 shares to Rachel if the stock price of Apple goes above 150 on or before the expiration date. Okay, if it's at 130 right now, it's got to get to 150 for this contract to be exercised and Josh to lose his shares, which is fine. If it doesn't reach 150, if it stays at 149, goes up to 140, stays at 130, the price of Apple, Josh keeps the premium and the contract expires worthless, and he doesn't repeat the process for the next month. He can go sell their contract and he gets paid regardless. However, if it does reach 150, Josh keeps the premium that Rachel paid him in the beginning, that $200, and the profits from the appreciation in the stock price. This is what I'm talking about. If the price of Apple rises to 150, it looks like this. Josh paid 130 per 100 shares, okay, $13,000 purchase cost. If he has to sell, if Apple's price goes above 150, he's going to have to sell his 100 shares to Rachel. That's what the contract is binding to. So he would then turn around and sell those shares for $15,000. So 150 times 100, 15,000 minus 13,000. So the sale price minus the purchase cost is a $2,000 gain for Josh, plus the $200 premium that he got paid for selling the contract in itself. So a total profit in this scenario of $2,200 of profit. Now, if we back up for a second here, if the contract is at $200 premium and the stock price of Apple does not reach this 150, Josh keeps the $200 and walks away with it free and clear. There's no other obligation on his part. He keeps his 100 shares of Apple as well, and he can though go ahead and repeat this the next month with a other contract to somebody else out there who wants to do the same thing. So either he's making $200 and keeping his shares, or he's banking $2,200 in total profit and he has to sell his shares. Either way, it's a win for Josh. So the benefits of covered calls. You can see that they create an additional income stream from stocks that you already own. You have to have the shares in your account for it to be a covered call. We're going to talk about uncovered call very soon. You can lock in profit if you end up selling and realize gains, which is a good thing in the stock account. It's always good to take some profit and lock it up and not have it sit there unrealized versus realized. That's different stock terms there. You want realized gains. That's when you're actually locking in profit. And you are limiting your downside risk. So if the stock price of Apple was to drop significantly, Josh, in our example, would still get paid that $200, even though the stock price dropped. If it goes up, you can see that he makes that $2,200 like we talked about in our example here. But if the stock price goes down, he ends up with that $200 in his pocket. The contract expires and go do it again the next month. And you can ultimately reduce your cost basis this way, which means the price you paid for those shares, when you purchase them for $13,000, if you get paid $200 selling a covered call and you don't get your shares called away, that $13,000, then you subtract $200 and you actually paid $12,800 for them. So you're getting the stocks at a bit of a discount when it comes to your purchase price. That's what it means by reducing your cost basis. Now, the risk of selling covered calls. There are some. There's nothing that's risk-free in this life, okay? They're safer than uncovered calls, but they aren't risk-free. And the idea is that if you sell a covered call, you are limiting your upside. And what I mean by this is if we sold our covered call back at 150, the sale price would be $15,000. That's a pretty good chunk of change when we talked about $2,200 total. But what if the stock price of Apple jumped up to 200? And then it was $20,000 and it was a $7,000 gain. That's what I mean by the stock price is potentially capped on the upside. Now, some say that's good, some say that's bad. It's never bad taking a profit. You never go broke taking a profit. And we're going to talk about very soon of when and when not to sell covered calls to hopefully not limit your upside. But if it does happen, it does give you the opportunity to lock in some profit and hopefully realize a gain. And there's also an opportunity cost when you lock into a contract. You're not actually as free to sell those shares if you wanted to. If you're under the contract, you have to wait till the contract is either exercised or expired, or you can close it early, assuming that you're in the red and you're in the green and you're going to make money. So there's just a little bit of a thought process about the opportunity cost when you're agreeing to go into one of these contracts. Now, a big distinction that you have to understand is a covered call versus an uncovered call. And if you already own shares of a stock in your position, in your portfolio, your position is covered. It is a covered call because you own 100 shares. This is the safe way to do this. If you don't own shares, then your position is naked, which is an uncovered call. And this is a way to take on unlimited risk, which is something you definitely do not want to do in the stock market. This is what I'm talking about. In our example, going back to the same example, Josh bought his 100 shares of Apple for $130 a share. With the strike price at 150, he's forced to sell if it hits that, if the stock price hits that, okay? And he would still make a nice profit, that $2,200 we talked about. If Josh didn't own shares and just agreed to sell an uncovered call, so he has no shares of Apple in his account at all, okay? And then the stock price of Apple jumped to $300 per share, some crazy upswing happened and the stock price jumped. He would then be forced to buy 100 shares at $300 each and then turn around and sell them back to Rachel for $150 per share. The math looks like this: $300 purchase times 100, 30 grand to purchase the shares because he was uncovered and the market took off. He has to sell the shares for the same price at $150 per share, 15 grand. He ends up selling for 15. He bought for 30. There's a $15,000 loss on his portfolio because he sold an uncovered call versus a covered call. If he would have sold a covered call, he would have made a lot of money if he would have not done this and taken on the unnecessary risk of selling an uncovered call. This is not something you want to do. You do not want to risk this happening to yourself by selling uncovered call and gambling. So who can use these types of things? Anyone who has 100 shares of stock in their account, anyone, any kind of an account, a tax-free savings account, you can use them. These are one of the few option strategies you can use in a tax-free account, both in the US and in Canada. I know for a fact here in Canada, in any kind of TFSA or RRSP account, you can only use covered calls. You cannot sell naked puts. You cannot buy puts, or you cannot use a lot of the options contract, but you can use covered calls because they are generally thought of as safe and secured when they're covered because you already have the stock in your portfolio. You can also use them in margin accounts and use them in any kind of non-registered trading account as well. So here's a good question. When is the best time to sell a covered call? Well, you make money in a covered call quickly if the stock price is projected to go lower. So if the market's moving lower, you're going to sell and get a little bit of cash from there. If the market is about to remain neutral, you can also do the same thing and just let the contract expire. You're going to have to wait for the entire expiry to go down. But basically, if the market's going to move lower or remain the same, it is considered a good time to sell a covered call. If it's around earnings announcements or any other volatile times, maybe there's a new executive added to your company's team, these injections of volatility make it a good time to also sell covered calls because it increases the amount of premium you will get paid as the seller. And if you want to actually sell and offload your position, but also get paid to do so, you can sell covered calls as well, what's known as at the money, and offload your position, get paid for your shares, and hopefully make a little bit of more in premium as well. When not to sell a covered call, when the stock price, the stock market is projected to move higher. When you don't want to do this is you don't want to cap your upside, right? As we talked about in the last couple slides, when the market's going to move higher, you don't want to go and just say, okay, I want to take this profit here and lock it in. You want to let the market kind of ride it out. Hopefully it gets to the top of the market. Then you can sell a covered call when it's projected to come back down a bit or remain neutral. If volatility is super low, you're not getting paid enough premium for the potential for your shares to be called away. You do not want to sell a covered call at this point either. And if you want to hold your position through an ex-dividend date, or if there's some external factor for your company, like an Apple new iPhone day or a new release day, maybe you don't want to have your shares called away in that window. Maybe you want to hold off from selling a covered call until after that day passes, and then go ahead and enter your position at that time. So how do you sell covered calls for passive monthly income? Well, you know how covered calls work. What you need to do then for monthly passive income, you already have the shares in your account, let's say. If you don't, just go buy them. You sell contracts with a monthly expiration date on shares you already own in your portfolio. You get paid to do this. You already have the shares in your account, so you're protected on the downside. And then after the contracts expire, you repeat it each and every month. And that's how you can create a consistent income with a few clicks of a button. Now for the bonus tip, make sure when you're doing this, you always sell a covered call at or above your acquisition price. That is a huge bonus tip here. You need to understand what that means. If you bought shares at 140, let's say, the strike price for the covered call contract that you sell needs to be at 140 or greater. Okay? If you don't do this, if you were to do it at 130, you're going to lose money. If you do it at 120, you're going to lose money. Okay? If it's at 140, you will make money and you will ensure that you don't lose money in your position. So understand that your acquisition price matters and only sell covered calls at or above your acquisition price. Now that you know what covered calls are and how they work, leave a comment and let me know which stock you're going to use them on in your account to start creating monthly income for yourself. I'm truly grateful for you taking the time to watch this video today, so thank you. If you want to like and subscribe to the channel, it would be greatly appreciated. And if you want to see a live demo of how to sell covered calls in a real trading account, check this out.